Make a recording for those friends who are going to be watching this later on. And so, my dear friends, I'm oftentimes told that many of you turn up every month and join us for these gatherings to draw some hope, some inspiration, some strength, a seed, perhaps, to place in the fertile soil of your own heart. And the truth of the matter is that it's not a one-way thing. And we actually inspire each other. We inspire one another. We, to use one of my favorite words, we hearten each other. We give courage to one another, courage from that root word of cœur, meaning heart. Some of you friends I recognize as dear ones, beloved ones who show up very faithfully every month. And I'm seeing quite a few people today whose faces, at least, are new to me. And if you're a dear friend returning to these gatherings, welcome. And if you're a friend who's joining us for the first time, also welcome. In the Zoom session, we have a chance to be together once a month. And if you are new to these gatherings, what we do is that we begin by listening to some sacred music, sound, recitation, as a remembrance that sound and music is the original vibration. It's the very means that Allah used to have the ruh, the spirit, enter into the body. So as I say in almost every session, this kind of sacred sound is not about banging on a drum. It's not about plucking at a string. It's the sound of the movement of the heavenly spheres. It's a reminder that we respond to music, even if we don't understand all the words, because music is ultimately celestial. And so are you. So are we. As others have said, we are celestial beings having an earthly experience. And in the letter that I sent out last night with the Zoom link and the adab that we try to follow, the beautiful manners that we try to follow in these sessions, common codes of courtesy to help create a sense of community. Things like, if you're able to, keep your videos on so that we can benefit from that eye-to-eye glance, that heart-to-heart witnessing of each other. And let's keep the microphones muted for now to help with the quality of the sound recording. And we'll begin by listening to some sacred sound. I'll share a sohbat, some teachings that come from the heart of the Islamic tradition, the Sufi tradition. And then will come the time for some small group fellowship. You'll have a chance to be reacquainted with some old dear friends and to meet some old dear friends for the first time. Then we'll come back together and talk about some of what we've experienced. And I'll try to leave you with a practice or a teaching to hold as a contemplation until we meet again, inshallah. I mentioned in that letter that I sent out last night that my own heart is a bit heavy. It's hard to be a human being and have a heart that has not been heavy for the last year and 2 weeks. We are witnesses to a genocide, and that is unfolding before the whole world's eyes to see. And it is not only aided and abetted, but it's insisted upon and protected by both parties of these United States of America that we call home. I think anybody who has a heart would see what has been happening in Gaza, also in the West Bank. Though it's on a much smaller scale, but yes, also suffering in Israel. Now, the atrocities and the bombings have spread across the border to Syria, Yemen, portions of Iraq. And as of last night, my own ancestral homeland, that beautiful jewel of the world, Iran. So late at night last night and early this morning, I was trying to reach my family members to know if they were safe. And as we always ask each other, how is their heart? And these are times that you learn a lot about what people are made out of. People there who are much more aware of these games that politicians and warmongers play, and the games which are not children's games, but they're games in which children pay the price. 15,000 of them in Palestine alone. Women pay the price, and men pay the price. And people there recognize just how dangerously close we are to a full-on regional war, but the kind of regional war which has been how world wars get started. If you're a student of history, this is what it looks like, my friends. And to have insane, hateful, racist, genocidal rulers, and to have foolish and uncaring politicians in our own country enabling all of this, well, this weighs heavy on a heart. So I come to you today with that heart that is heavy, but still inspired by the fact that when I reached my family, and it was 6 o'clock in the morning, their time, and I asked them, how is your heart? The very first thing that they said, and I've got the text to show you, is Alhamdulillah. Right? Thanks be to God. Yes, we hear that bombs are falling on our beautiful city, but Alhamdulillah. And that does give me some hope. Some of you know that we had a plan and we had a schedule, what our British friends would call a schedule. I thought that we were going to have the stories of the prophets, and we were making great progress. We started with Adam and Hava, Adam and Eve, and we talked about Hazrat Ibrahim and Hazrat Musa. We talked about Khizr, who is really Yoda, and Musa and the Pharaoh. And I've been thinking that one of these days we're going to get to Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. But then there are things that keep coming up that seem like we would benefit from a time and a place to share this time and to focus on some of these teachings. And so a few days ago, I was sitting there and I was thinking, as somebody was telling me, these are strange times that we live in. And one person with a very dry sense of humor said, "Isn't that a Chinese curse? Blessing. May you live in interesting times." And that reminded me of this saying of the Habib, of the chosen one, alayhi salatu wassalam, which is the subject of our gathering today. In the beginning, Islam came as something strange, and it will return someday as something strange, as a stranger, and blessed are the strangers. So I want you to hold that thought in mind as we begin with our session of sacred music to help us get attuned. And I almost played Feiruz for us today, that Lebanese goddess, that diva, Inni la ansaka Philistine. But maybe I'll just share that link with you. And instead, I thought, let's listen to a few minutes of the evening zikr of Omar Hisham. So that if it feels like the darkness of the night is deepening, as indeed in this season we are walking into the darkness, that there is a God of the day who is also the God of the night. So, Bismillah, let's listen to a few minutes of this evening dhikr before we get on with our sohbat.
اللهم إني أسألك علما نافعا ورزقا طيبا وعملا متقبلا اللهم إني أسألك علما نافعا ورزقا طيبا وعملا متقبلا اللهم إني أسألك علما نافعا ورزقا طيبا وعملا متقبلا أستغفر الله وأتوب إليه 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 أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق أعوذ بكلمات الله التامات من شر ما خلق اللهم صل وسلم على نبينا محمد 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 اللهم صل وسلم على نبينا صل وسلم على نبينا محمد. اللهم صل وسلم على نبينا محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد.
Alhamdulillah. So many of you know that I do recommend for people to make a practice of listening to Omar Hisham's morning dhikr in the morning. It's a beautiful dhikr, chanting and a meditation to start off your days. And then if you're able to end the day with this evening dhikr, and I will put both of the links in the chat in just a little bit of time for you. And it's a wonderful way of bookending our days, my friends. So let's talk about this beautiful and indeed perplexing hadith from the chosen one, from the blessed prophet, peace and blessings upon him. And it's one of the sayings of the Habib that is itself strange. It's a hadith about Islam having began as something strange, and the statement itself is a little bit strange, and it's interpreted in all these different ways. So I want us to use it as a query, as a contemplation, as something to hold up and to see how does it resonate with you. So here's what it says, and this is an authentic hadith. It is found at least in 5 different versions in different collections of hadith. Interestingly enough, it is recorded in identical fashion in Sunni hadith collections and in Shia hadith collections. So the Habib says, إن الإسلام بدأ غريبا. Indeed, Islam began as a stranger, or Islam began as something strange, something rare, something out of place, alone. All of those are possible meanings of this word gharib. إن الإسلام بدأ غريبا. Islam began as a stranger, as something strange. وسيعود غريبا. And it will someday come back as a stranger. It will someday come back as something strange. كما بدأ, just as it began. And so just when you think, okay, so in the beginning, Islam was not tradition. Islam was not convention. There was something radical about Islam. There was something countercultural about Islam. It was not sent as a way of affirming things as they are, but it was a beacon of light to hold out how things should be. Martin used to always say, you should never confuse the isness of things, the way things are, with the oughtness of things, the way they ought to be. Islam started out as something strange, something rare, something out of place, something alone, gharib. And it will someday come back as that. And then just when you think you sorted it out, comes the last part in most of the version, Fatuba leghuraba. So blessed are the strangers. Blessed are the out of place ones. Blessed are the ones who are alone. Blessed are the weirdos. And for those of you, those of us who for much of our life have been called a little strange, people who are a little weird, people who keep insisting that you're a love Sufi who also cares a lot about social justice. And people say, no, these are separate commitments. These are separate bookshelves, as they used to tell me. Love is one bookshelf and social justice is another. And you kept saying, in my heart of hearts, I just know if you love the folk, how can you possibly be silent when you see people hurting? If you know that the breath of Allah has been breathed into each and every single soul, how can you not want to have food in their bellies, a roof over their head, dignity in their bones? And people keep calling you strange. People keep saying that that's not how we do things. That's not how it's done. And you remind them, well, in the very beginning, Islam began as something strange, as a stranger, as a loner, and it'll come back someday as something strange. Now, it's a beautiful invitation, the saying, because it doesn't have just one way of reading it. That's the lovely thing about poetry. That's the lovely thing about works of art. And that's the lovely thing about some of these sayings of the Prophet, alayhi salatu wassalam. Indeed, when you take a look around the world, you see lots of strange doo-doo happening. If I wasn't in such sublime gathering of sweet friends, I might have tapped into my thesaurus and found a synonym for doo-doo. But, you know, I'm a proper Persian Southern boy, so I behave myself. There is a lot of strange stuff happening, and some of that strange stuff is coming from people who proclaim to be acting in the name of God, who claim to be religiously motivated. It can start with the very genocide that we already talked about. People say, oh, we're doing this in the name of our old and ancient real estate agent, God, who thousands of years ago gave us this land, and therefore we have the right to kill children, to kill 50,000 people, to uproot olive trees, to bomb 80% of homes and almost every hospital. And our response is always the same. That's a strange kind of religious talk, because we actually have way too much respect for the faith that you profess to proclaim. And we know the faith of Moses. We know the faith of Abraham. We know the faith of Noah. We know the God who's on the side of the poor and the orphan and the needy and the widow and the stranger. We know the Bible, and we are more true to the Bible than this abomination that you claim to be claiming in the name of this perversion. We remember the parts of the Bible where God says, be kind to the stranger, for you yourselves were once strangers. Of course, no tradition is immune to this. For those of us for whom The heart is as open as the sky, and the fertile soil of your being is as vast as all of the earth, and who are rooted and grounded in Islam. Well, there's a strange kind of Islam that we see around us. You see people who are building skyscrapers towering over the Kaaba. And astaghfirullah, desecrating the very house of our great mother Khadija by turning it into toilets. You see nations in the Gulf that have billions and billions of dollars of wealth, but are building it on the back of a modern day slavery system. And what to say about the atrocities of the Taliban and the Iranian regime and 50 other authoritarian regimes around the world? That's a strange kind of Islam. You go over to India and you see this Hindu fascist movement oppressing its own Muslim citizens, having modern day pogroms. That's a strange kind of a Hindu claim. And you can say, we know the Hindu tradition. We've seen your beauty. We actually have more respect for the beauty of this tradition that you say to be representing than this atrocity that you are committing. And on it goes, right down to our Christian sisters and brothers. We are 10 days away from this momentous vote with these two horrible, horrible candidates. You can have anything that you want as long as it's genocide A or genocide B. And you're going to have 100 million evangelical Christians with Jesus on one shoulder and this orange baboon on the other, and they're going to walk into the voting booth and Jesus is going to lose. That's a strange kind of a Christian faith. And we got to be the ones to say, no, I remember Matthew 25. I remember the thing where Jesus says, that which you do to the least of God's children, you do unto me. Who are the least of God's children today? They're right here at home. They cross the border. My apologies to baboons. Baboons don't do such things. Baboons are perfect creatures of Allah. I'm running out of animal creatures to pair together with orange here, you know? Baboons are Muslim, technically speaking. It's these humans that I have some doubts about. So here's going to be the invitation, my friends, as you go into your small groups later today. Both meanings of that word strange and stranger. On one hand, what does it mean to say that Islam began as something that didn't fit? Islam began as something countercultural. Islam began as something out of the norm because the norms were so messed up. Remember, in the Quran, in the language of our blessed book, every single time that somebody says, I am doing such and such because this is tradition. I'm doing such and such because this is the way of our ancestors. I'm doing such and such because this is the way of our forefathers. That's a pagan argument. That's the argument of somebody who is rejecting the message of God and rejecting the message of the prophets. In the Quran, the message of the prophets is something fresh. It's something new. The prophets have never been sent to say, steady as she goes. Be quite moderate in the pace of change. Don't go too fast, people, in feeding the poor. Right? That's not a prophet. The prophet says, my heart has been cranked up to such a level of sensitivity to the suffering of the poor, the widow, the orphan, the needy, the stranger, that if I don't speak out, the rocks are going to cry out. That's a prophetic message. That's what it is to follow the prophets. And a gharib is a stranger, is somebody who is away from their peeps, somebody who's away from their community, somebody who's away from the protection of their people. And because the gharib is away from protection of their people, they're oftentimes poor. They're marginal. They're vulnerable. So, in fact, in some Muslim languages, Urdu, for example, gharib does mean poor. Islam began as something poor. Poor not just in a material sense, but also that. Poor both in the sense where the Habib says, I don't take pride in anything, but if I had to, I would take pride in my poverty because all of me is dependent on Allah, right down to very being. The gift of being is that which comes from Allah, who is the Ghani, who is the rich. But poor is not just symbolic. The followers of the Habib were poor folk. We came as a poor, we started as a poor community. Somewhere as we're looking at these 5-star and 6-star and 7-star hotels being built around Mecca and Medina, we have to remember a prophet and a community who were so poor that they used to tie stones to their belly just to have that sensation of having food in their stomach. That's how we started. But my invitation to us when we get ready to go into our sessions in a few minutes is both meanings of that word. What is it about the faith that you see around you? And let's not talk about other people's faith, our own faith, our own community. What is it that seems strange? What is it that seems like maybe that's just not how things ought to be? What if there's that nagging sense inside that says, I know there is a better way. I know there is a higher path. And then what is it about us that seems a little strange in the community which is supposed to be our home? How is it that we find ourselves strangers in the place that's supposed to be our home? How do we find ourselves gharib, unwelcomed, strange? And in that other sense of the word, queer. And then the Habib says, if you find yourself out of place, if you find yourself alone, if you find yourself marginal, fatuba leghuraba, and blessed are, give good news to, blessed are the weirdos. Can we also see that by not taking the easy path, not selling out, by holding on to that burning conviction in your heart, there's also a blessing that has come your way. And it's never been an easy one, but you've chosen to speak the truth and to hold it in your hand as if it was that proverbial hot coal, burning coal that you hang on to. I want to say a couple of other things about this hadith and how it's been interpreted. Tuba, blessed, blessing, that the Habib promises to the strangers, to the weirdos, to the lonely ones, misfits, all of us. This also has a community. You're actually not as alone as you think. If you go back to the time of Hazrat Ibrahim and you read about our mother Hajar, Hagar, remember that according to some Talmudic readings, Hagar means Hagar, the stranger. Hagar was literally the other woman. Unlike Sarah, nice Jewish girl, Hagar is the other woman, the Egyptian woman, and by many accounts, the Black woman, the African woman. So if you are a stranger, well, then Hagar is with you. Hajar is with you. If you're a stranger and if you're strange, and I hope this goes without saying, just to simply say if you're a stranger and a strange, we're not talking about running out there and on purpose embracing every crazy thing, right? We are talking about hanging on to the highest of morals, being true to the call of the prophets, to stand with those who find themselves vulnerable. Well, the Habib at one point says that there's a tree in paradise called Tuba that is so big and so vast that if a horse rider on a fastest horse was riding in its shade for 100 years, you would not get to cross it. But Tuba leghuraba, and that tree, that piece of paradise, that vast realm of shade also belongs to you. I mentioned that this hadith of the Habib comes up in 5 or 6 different versions. Sometimes it's included in a book, in the chapter called Kitabul Fitan, the book of tribulation. And my beloved ones, my friends, it's hard to look at the age in which we live and to not conclude that we are living in an age of tribulation. And in one of those versions, the focus shifts and says, there's going to come a day when Islam and faith itself is going to be so marginal that it's going to be like a little snake crawling back into its hole. That's how hard it's going to be to practice real faith, prophetic faith, when so much that's around you is gaslighting and double talk. And on one side, people proclaiming their vitriol and racism openly. And on the other side, to have someone says, oh, I recognize that this must be a very challenging time for the Muslim community and the Arab community while signing $18 billion of aid for genocidal weaponry. And if in the midst of that, you find yourself being situated, then yeah, it does seem like, where's the church? Where's the real synagogue? Where the Muslim leaders who are raising their head and speaking? Where all the feminists? What happened to all of those academics who were talking about decolonize this and decolonize that? They were decolonizing everything under God's great sun. Decolonize art history, decolonize philosophy. Well, what do you think colonizing looks like? And what do you think decolonizing looks like? So if you see all of that, I want you to know that we have friends and we have resources in our tradition. One of the great manuals of Sufism is a book called Mirsadul Ibad, which the amazing scholar Hamid Algar translated as the path of God's bondsmen. And in that book, Najmuddin Razi says, Islam ز دست رفت بس بی خبرید بگرفت جهان کفر شما در خوابید. Islam is lost, faith is lost, religion is lost, and you are unaware. Unbelief is engulfing the whole earth, and you slumber. So he's writing 800 years ago, but he says, what he says could have been written this week. And he comes back to this hadith. He says, it is to be feared as a present danger that the very name and the trace of Islam itself, anything that has survived of it till today, will vanish because of our ill-omened and useless disputes, so that no sign of religion will remain, and it will all withdraw behind the veil. Didn't the Habib say Islam began as a stranger and shall yet again become a stranger? O God, awaken us from the sleep of the neglectful. Take us not to task for our evil deeds. Give no dominion over us to those who are without compassion for us. Let me read that one again. O God, give no dominion over us to those who are without compassion for us. لا تسلط علينا من لا يرحمنا. But it's not too late. There's still time. There's still time to return to that meaning of Tuba lil Quraba, blessings on the strangers. The great master of Ishq, of love, Ain al-Qazat Hamidani, at one point, very realistically, he says, every religious tradition that has ever been becomes worn out. Islam does too. He says, but there's still hope. We're still fresh. It's not too late to get things right. And so let me send you to your breakout rooms by quoting for you what Rumi says about this. So Rumi and Shams quote the same saying. And Shams was being criticized in his time. The great scholars of Khorasan, that place where present-day Iran and Afghanistan and Central Asia meet up, they had a lot of pride at really being in many ways one of the great centers of Islamic civilization, if not the center. And they were puzzled by why would Maulana Rumi, a child of this blessed land of Khorasan, come to follow some slightly less distinguished person like Shams. And Shams at one point says, Islam began as a stranger. It's a stranger and comes from another world. It didn't come from Mecca. It says the homeland that faith comes from, the Vatan that faith comes from, the Vatan, the homeland that we come from, is the very presence of God, which is beloved and sought after by the believer. Let's sit with that one. When it says that Islam began as something strange and stranger, gharib, it's because it came and we came from the presence of God. And we came into this world as a stranger. And what we want to become acquainted with again, the home that we want to establish through these kinds of bonds of friendship and fellowship, it's not to become Persian, it's not to become Turkish, it's not even to become Desi, as hard as it is to believe. We want to become reacquainted and return to our original home, which is the very loving presence of God. That's where and when we're going to be at home. So when you see a great Sufi, like really the sage of South Asia, Khaja Moinuddin Chishti, the founder of the Chishti order, who's given the nickname Gharib Nawaz. Gharib Nawaz, the one who takes care of the poor, the one who looks after the poor, the stranger. It has all of those meanings. To be a person of faith of the highest caliber, to be a Sufi, is to feed the poor, to be with the poor, to love poor folk. May God have mercy on Gustavo Gutierrez, the very father of Latin American liberation theology, who just passed away this week. He and Moinuddin Chishti are great friends. They got each other. They understood one another. Gharib Nawaz, Moinuddin Chishti, physically took care of the poor, the needy, the stranger, the lonely ones, and they are the ones who help us return back to the presence of Allah. All right, beloveds, I'm going to open up your breakout rooms and we're going to spend 20 minutes in there. If you're new to us, here's the best practice that we have. Nobody's here to be the guru, the sheikh, the sheikha, the healer, the therapist, the ideologue. We're just friends walking each other home. No one dispenses medicine and healing to others. We just talk about our own experience. What are the things about religion as you find around you that you find strange, whacked? And what are the ways in which you find yourself treated alone, like a stranger, when you know that you have a home somewhere? So I'm going to open up the rooms. Please feel free to join. And then I'm going to bring us back and talk about a few more themes. See you all, inshallah, in just a few minutes. All right. I hope that felt like more of a sufficient time in the breakout room. Was that good? You could have stayed a little bit longer. Yeah. Let me send you the linkage to the two videos. So here is the morning dhikr, and here is the evening dhikr. And the evening dhikr is the one that we listened to in the very beginning of things. All right, I would love to hear from anyone from any of the rooms that had something come up that you felt like other friends could benefit from listening to you and sharing it. We have a few minutes. Anybody have something? Feel free to put up your virtual hand, or if I can see it, your physical hand. Rashid, Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum, John, how are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too, my friend. I was talking in my group that, I feel stranger no matter where I am, right? I'm in the US as a Muslim, you feel stranger. You back to home country, Bangladesh, where I come from. It doesn't matter. You go to any Muslim majority country, you feel like a stranger too, because the way many of the Muslim countries practice their own faith, you have something mentioned early on, it feels stranger. And so I think for us, it's really a struggle. Where do you find home? And one of the verses in the Quran that I always have felt close to is this verse that says, this book is a guide for those who are muttaqin. Taqwa is and taqwa is that sense of connecting with God to maintain the essence of humanity in ourselves, right? So that's really, to me, is the grounding, how we can feel home. If I can be aligned with myself and with God, that's really home.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the late and great Edward Said, may God bless him and make us worthy successors to him. He writes very eloquently about both honoring and acknowledging this experience of exile, of being an immigrant, being a refugee, the incredible, extraordinary loss that has come along with that, the severing of bonds, being away from trees and lands that your ancestors have cultivated for centuries. And the fact that, exactly as you say, in his case, being a Palestinian who 40 years in America, and he always felt like an outsider. And yet, when he would go back to Palestine, recognizing how much of a New Yorker he is, and how uh, so in some ways, I think his autobiography is even called Out of Place. Out of Place. But rather than simply pausing to say, well, it's just all about loss, and we're lost here and we're lost there, one of the things that Said does, Edward, is, I mean, there's even that name, right? Edward Wadi Said. Like, what are you? Are you Edward? Are you Eddie? Are you Wadi? Which one are you sort of really? Yeah, well, he's both. He's all. And so he says at one point, he comes to the point of realizing that, yes, there is tremendous, extraordinary loss. And that's one that many of us, most of us around this little, rectangle have shared in some capacity. And the fact that he is an exilic being also enables him to always look at things with a critical and fresh point of view. It gives him the potential to never settle for the easy dogmas and the easy answers. And it's precisely that ability to remain an outsider that always enables him to ask the question of, why can't it be a different way? Shouldn't there be a better way? And I would really encourage us to look at that, and then to also remember that third space, if you would, is not only about being a third space cultural kid or racial kid or religious kid. It's also that the third space is also really God's space. And when so many cultures, even so many religious traditions, have fallen so far away from that prophetic message, is there the possibility, not just as a voice out in the wilderness, but as a community of people who are accountable to each other and responsive to God, to say, I know there is a better way. I know there's a higher path. And yeah, I think that's one advantage of that perspective. So Maya, I see your hand up there.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for this amazing opportunity.
Alhamdulillah.
Because you talked about Edward Said, there's a beautiful poem that Mahmoud Darwish wrote when he met him in America. And it's about him like being or belonging to two different worlds or many worlds. And in Arabic it says, أنا من هناك أنا من هنا ولست هناك ولست هنا. I'm going to read it in English. He says, so Mahmoud Darwish is talking about Edward Said, saying, he says, I'm from there, I'm from here, but I'm neither there nor here. I have two names, which meet and part. I have two languages, but I have long forgotten which is the language of my dreams. It's part of the poem. Thank you.
Mashallah. That's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. Thank you. And we do need, as strange as it sounds, at a time of genocide, and when we want to, there's such a need to elevate people's consciousness, to also remember and to never forget that our poets, our dreamers, our visionaries, our rebels, our musicians, our midwives, our grandmothers, these are all voices that we desperately need to resurrect, to hang on to never ever let go of. So yeah, for Mahmoud Darwish, for Qasim Kanafani, for Feiruz, like these are extraordinary voices that we long to and we belong to, and we long for them and the wisdom they have to offer us. Thank you. Maybe if there's one more friend that has something that came up in their session that they wanted to share. Michael John, I see your hand up.
We had a lovely young person, Aida, in our group, and just to give hope, I know it's to find a home, and just to say, I don't know how to phrase it, Omicron, please help me, but I think that possibly this is a home here. For me, it is. And it's a starting point for somebody who is maybe searching and looking for belonging and one belonging, and maybe we all have different belongings where we belong to. So, yeah.
Well, you, my beloved brother, you're already at home, and being in your presence is already home to me and already home to so many of us. And, you know, it's one of the loveliest ways in our tradition to honor one another is to say that there's people that when we're together, not only do they make you feel at home, they themselves are home. And then when we're together, it feels like you become a homeful person. And home is like love. It's not solitary. And there's so much that is utterly and absolutely messed up in the world right now. But one of the things that I do take great hope and consoling for my aching heart from is that there's so many of you where our grandparents would not have recognized one another. They wouldn't have ever met. They wouldn't, if they had met, they might have sought each other as the Hagar, as a stranger, as the other. Even if they came from the same faith, perhaps they might not have necessarily found ways of communicating at that heart level. And, you know, the cool kids of a generation ago on a basketball court, they used to say, game recognizes game. And I think now we would say love recognizes love, and heart recognizes heart, and home recognizes home. So let's hang on to that, and let's keep being homes, inshallah, for each other. Today, I do have a commitment to have us be able to say farewell at 3:30 Eastern time. And I wanted to share a couple of things with you, if I may. One of them is that I'm going to pause. Actually, no, let's go. So I've been talking with a few of you, few of us, and we're trying to think about what are some good, healthy, caring ways in which, for those of us who feel homeless at the level of hearts and community, what are some of the ways of helping to create that sense of longing and belonging? And I think one of the things that we're going to do this very carefully in a curated way, is I am going to create a WhatsApp group, an optional one, and a very carefully focused one. for those friends for whom this type of an Islamically grounded Sufi teaching that is open to everybody, but clearly is cognizant of its roots in the path of love and the teachings of Rumi, of the Prophet and the Quran, is something that speaks to you, where we could share resources and queries around particular items that we are exploring. It would categorically, so I've already violated my, I've insulted the animal kingdom already, so I'm going to do it one more time. It is categorically not the place to be sharing cute cat memes. And I have a great cat and I love my cat, but I don't need to impose my cat on you. Nor is it even necessarily the place to be forwarding every article on, you know, Pakistani politics and the impact of the Zionist lobby on American politics and what have you. Like, those things are known, right? What is less known, what is unknown, what is underknown are places and spaces where you can be reliably confident that the message is intended to nourish ourselves spiritually, aesthetically, intellectually. And it's an experiment, and we will moderate it and to see how it goes. But that's one option that I have been thinking about. And then the other thing, and this is just a sharing of information in 2 minutes, is I'm mindful of the fact that we have some friends here who have not been joining us for previous sessions, and so they're new to things. So this is just an announcement of some of the things we're going to have coming up. In 4 days, I think, 4 or 5 days, I'm supposed to be sending to the Saudi hotels the final list of participants who are going to come on this year's Umrah and Medina program, Mecca and Medina program. And this year we have the great blessing of having Sidi Hamza of Morocco and our own amazing, extraordinary Sadia Sheikh of South Africa joining me in leading this program. This is open to any Muslim friend from any country. The dates you see, middle of December. And that's a really extraordinary, safe space for people who are interested in that kind of a journey. I see a couple of the friends here who joined us on that beautiful program last year. Then in April, inshallah, we have the Morocco program. And that one is April 18th to 28th in Marrakesh and Fez. And one night in this amazing desert setting, which actually looks like that. It's not a stock photo. That's the actual tent where we'll be having dinner. And then in June, inshallah, we'll have our program in Turkey, in Istanbul, and Konya and Cappadocia. That's our longest lasting program. This will be the 23rd year, inshallah, that we'll get to go. And so what I'm going to do is in the chat box, I'm going to put, I have not yet figured out about the Rumi retreat, Zahrajan. And thank you, Sarajan, for the very kind words about the program last year. So there's an email address that I put up. You can write with any questions that you might have about any of these programs. And then this website has links to all the programs as well as the online courses. Especially if you're new, and you have not yet had a chance to take part, then this would be a wonderful opportunity. All right. So let me pause there, beloved ones. May this, inshallah, have been a light for your hearts. May it have rekindled the hope that though we might be strangers and some may call us weirdos, Fatuba leboraba, blessed are the strangers, inshallah. Thank you for letting us not feel so alone and so strange, my friends. Take care and salam alaikum, khudafez, iyi günler, be well, and see you inshallah next month, friends.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Assalamu
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.